Talk from 9 to noon here on SantaCruzVoice.com. It is now 9:06. Time to begin. And, of course, one of the things we have to do at the opening of the program, give the phone number so that if you decide sometime during the program that you're sufficiently outraged that you'd like to call in and give me a piece of your mind, 831-265-5050 is the number, 831-265-5050. There's a couple of things that I'd like to talk about today. I think we've covered Charlie Kirk about as well as we can. We've talked about that terrible assassination quite a bit in every program since, and it's still a story. I understand that. I know Jimmy Kimmel is going back to work, so for all of the people who were upset that he was pulled off the air, well, that lasted what, a couple of days. I don't know. I don't want to discuss that right now. Maybe if somebody calls and wants to talk about it, we will. But there are a couple of other things today that deserve our attention. One is a domestic American story. The other is an international story. Let's start with the big one first, the international story. There are civilized nations that ought to know better who are now officially offering recognition to a Palestinian state that does not, in fact, exist. That's right. I guess you could have said that there was a Palestinian state for, 15 years or so in Gaza. After all, Israel withdrew from Gaza completely in, 2005, something like that, and it wasn't until 2023, 18 years later, that Hamas, which was running Gaza on behalf of the Palestinian people, decided to go to war. There was absolutely no burning reason for this, merely Hamas spotting an opportunity. Hey, we can kill an awful lot of Jews if we do this, and that, after all, is what we want to do. And the more nefarious part of it, I hate like poison to say this because it's so greasy, but it looks as if Hamas, always give credit where credit's due, Hamas may have decided by initiating this war, we can win a public relations victory. Now, they understood that Israel was a far stronger force, that they could not prevail against the Israeli military. What could they do? Well, they could hide. And that's what they've done. They've taken their hostages. They still have, a few 50-odd hostages, most of whom are dead. But they've taken those hostages and they have hidden in a labyrinth of tunnels underneath Gaza. See, for the 18 years of the Palestinian state, there were plenty of Western nations and the UN and like that all saying, oh, we've got to help these people. They don't have anything. Well, the reason they didn't have anything was because they didn't do anything, at least nothing productive. The GDP of Gaza over those 18 years was measured in munitions and tunnels, all of which were aimed at one single goal, making war. Rockets launched into Israel. This was the product of Gaza. There was no such thing as Gaza fruits and vegetables, Gaza electronic products, Gaza textiles, or anything like that, anything useful. Nothing. So all of those billions of dollars that well-meaning idiots sent to Hamas, well, we got that money back, I guess, a lot of it, in the form of explosives and various other things that we didn't like when we found out what they were. So, at this point, it looks as if Hamas is winning the war. At least in terms of public opinion, because, as I say, civilized nations, nations that ought to know better, are now crowning Hamas with success. Do you know why we Palestinians are famous? Asked Mahmoud Darwish, the revered Palestinian national poet. He was talking to an Israeli about 20 years ago. Because you are our enemy. The interest in us stems from the interest in the Jewish question. That much is made clear again this week as France, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and some others recognize a Palestinian state as punishment for Israel. That's the logic here. Israel defends itself against terror. Israel seeks to get its hostages back. See, all the complaint going on right now, oh, look at all the death and destruction in Gaza. All of it is Israel seeking to get their hostages back. Because Hamas has made it clear they will not return these people. So the only way to get them back is by force. And the Israeli public, interestingly, the Israeli public is conflicted. On the one hand, they want an end to the war. The Israelis are peace-loving people. But on the other hand, they're insisting that the government, the Israeli government, continue to prosecute efforts to return the hostages. So they're asking for two things that are mutually exclusive. One is peace and the other is the hostages. You don't get the hostages without fighting for them. And so these other countries, these supposedly civilized nations, decide, well, this business of Israel fighting to defend itself, this business of Israel fighting to get their hostages back, we can't tolerate that. Those Jews should learn their place. They should accept their lot in life. If Hamas takes hostages, then that's because Jews deserve to be taken as hostages. And any effort on behalf of the Jewish government to return those hostages is impermissible. We can't have that. They hardly even pretend that Palestine meets the criteria for statehood. They don't even frame recognition as the assessment of Palestinian sovereignty that it should be. Instead, they use recognition as a political statement against the Israeli war effort. The stakes are sanctions on Israel in the future and a victory for Hamas today. That's how it's been received by Israel, across the political spectrum and by Hamas itself. Why are all these countries recognizing Palestine now? Hamas Politburo member Ghazi Hamad asks on Al Jazeera, the fruits of October 7th, the 2023 massacre that he vows to repeat, are what caused the world to open its eyes to the Palestinian cause. So the lesson, we're going to teach those Hamas people, those terrorists, a lesson. The lesson they have learned is that terrorism is a successful tactic. If on a chosen morning you erupt into Israel, brutally murder 1,200 or so people, rape the women, burn the children, commit the most atrocious, just acts of barbarity, and then take hostages on top of that before you go back to your little hidey hole, all of this will in due time be rewarded by the world community. Wow. Slaughter Jews. Hold hostages long enough to use Gazans as human shields, and you get your own state. In his fixation on the Israeli military response, French President Macron helps Mr. Hamad turn October 7th into Palestinian Independence Day. In leading his group of mainly left-of-center governments, Mr. Macron claims he is isolating Hamas. Since the terror group opposes a two-state solution, Hamas does so because that solution requires Palestinians to make peace with Israel, but those recognitions disconnect statehood from any peace agreement, granting recognition even without the reconciliation. Hamas gets everything they want. Why not demand that steps toward peace come first, rather than settle for Palestinian Authority commitments that may never be delivered? Why not condition recognition on the release of all hostages? and the exile of Hamas. That would mean Hamas rejectionism, the obstacle to a Palestinian victory, instead of its midwife. Rather than isolate Hamas, Mr. Macron acts to isolate Israel. This brings a Palestinian state no closer. On October 7, 2023, Israelis saw one vision of Palestinian nationalism in action. They also saw Hamas gain support from Palestinians afterward, and Israel condemned for fighting back. Israel will now need to see something different from Palestinians to be convinced that murdering Jews isn't their national pastime. If not, why should Israel believe a West Bank state wouldn't soon look like Gaza and prepare another October 7th style attack? After that, the world wouldn't blame Israel in the aftermath? Of course. Mr. Macron didn't help on Thursday when he told CBS News there is no Hamas in the West Bank. Everyone knows there is. That's just asinine. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said recognition is meant to revive the hope of peace and a two-state solution. His deputy, David Lammy, added that we are some significant distance from two states, all of which makes it puzzling that they are committing the UK to the claim that the second state already exists. Recognizing the state is intended as safe diplomatic theater for their Western domestic audiences. Detached from the harsh Middle East reality, the Palestinians have consistently chosen the struggle to destroy Israel rather than the offer of a state alongside it. To say, let them have both, as France, the UK, Canada, Australia, etc. now say, is to make Hamas stay. This is, I would say it's amazing, but then again it isn't. It would have been amazing a few years ago, but I guess Paul Johnson was right. In his book, Modern Times, the great historian Paul Johnson discusses, among other things, the birth of the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel. I don't have the book in front of me, but I remember him using the phrase that Israel came into being by slipping through an open window or an open doorway in time. And we've heard that kind of language before about there's this window of opportunity. Something can happen here, but the window is closing, and presently it will close, and at that point, the opportunity for whatever it is to happen will have passed. Now, Johnson says that in this particular case, the opportunity was seized upon. In the period just after the end of World War II. Remember, World War II ended in 1945. And what happened? We got the awful images of the final solution. Now, I don't know. I guess even at that time there were Holocaust deniers. People said, that never happened. This number of people is minuscule, and were utterly marginalized because General Eisenhower, the overall commander-in-chief of the Allied effort, when he heard of Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Dachau, he made absolutely sure that large numbers of motion picture film were shot. Many feet, many minutes of film, detailing in absolutely lurid ways the reality of what had gone on. Because Eisenhower himself said, if we don't photograph this, if we don't make a record of it, if we don't absolutely document this, people won't believe it. In the aftermath of World War II, the United Nations was first formed. At that time, in the idealism of a war just won, of freedom triumphant, of an Axis smashed, one of those high water marks of idealism in the world. A time when imperfect people, always imperfect, were striving to accomplish their best work. And it was at this time, in that same afterglow of the greatest orgy of violence the world had ever endured, that the United Nations sought to somehow make some sort of restitution to the Jewish people for what the world had done to them. Oh, anti-Semitism was nothing new, as I've often pointed out on this program. It is the oldest human prejudice, going back not just centuries, but millennia. So this one time, the world finally said, the Jewish people have been so wronged, so abused. An actual, real attempt at extermination and significant progress toward that goal. When you're talking about a people whose total number was maybe 20 million, Jews are a minority in the world, always have been. When you talk about 6 million dead out of that number, that's a big percentage. The equivalent among modern America, right now America has a population of what, 340 million? What if something killed over 100 million of us? A few years ago, we were all screaming and running in circles because of COVID. COVID, what? 1 million dead? Something like that? About the equivalent of a really, really bad flu year. Multiply that by over 100. And that lets you know the catastrophe that befell the Jewish people. And so, the ancient land of Israel, or part of it anyway, became a homeland for the Jews, the first one they had had in centuries. Oh, there had been Israel before, but it had been conquered. Well, the Romans came in, and you know them. And after that, when the Romans were driven out, who drove them out? The Arabs, Muslims. This was after the advent of Islam in the mid-7th century. And whereas the Romans had been the conquerors, now the Arabs became the conquerors. The age-old push of one empire versus another. And the Jews, well, they were just people who happened to be there at the time. They had neither the numbers nor the power to affect great events. They didn't make history. History was something that happened to them. That was manifested later on in the Holocaust. That was the worst history they ever had happening to them. And again, in the aftermath of World War II, it was the idea of the men and women who gathered at the first United Nations to try to certainly not undo this. There's no undoing 6 million dead. but to try to make some sort of settlement. The idea that the Jewish people would now, once again for the first time in centuries, have a homeland where instead of having history happen to them, they could actually make some of their own. And the story of Israel in the years since 1948 has been a success story. In terms of national security, they have beaten off attack after attack, each one of them aimed at exterminating the state of Israel and killing as many as possible of those damn Jews who inhabit it. In terms of economic development, Israel, which started off as a quasi-socialist state, has since learned that, hey, you know, the way to really create wealth is through market economics. Israel is one of those countries that desocialized, and in so doing, created a vibrant economy that now affords a high and rising standard of living to the people who live there, a significant number of whom are Israeli Arabs, because the Jews are perfectly happy to have a significant number of Israeli Arabs. The Arabs who wanted to remain in territory that became Israel, well, they simply did. Many of them owned land. They continue to. They own businesses. They sit in the halls of government. They occupy positions in the judiciary. Show me an Arab country with Jews sitting on its governing boards and in its halls of justice. That's right, you can't. So it is this pluralistic society, this westernized society, which is so offensive to the Islamist fanatics of Hamas and other terrorist organizations. And when confronted with a choice between supporting Israel in its fight against Hamas, because remember, Hamas will not permit Israel to live in peace. Read their charter. Hamas exists to destroy Israel and to kill Jews. That's its function. Hamas, insofar as anti-Semitism is concerned, Hamas is even worse than Hitler and the Nazis were. Hitler and the Nazis had other fish to fry. They were busy trying to build a German empire and bring the Slavic peoples and these other peoples under German political control to win living room, Lebensraum for the Reich, etc. Hamas has no such aspirations. No, they're focused. All they want to do is kill Jews and destroy Israel. And if they didn't make that clear on October 7th, 2023, I don't know what would make it clear to you. The evil ghost of Schicklgruber was looking up from hell on that date and laughing his head off. But what must give him even greater pleasure is to watch the subsequent developments and see that those civilized states that were so upset by him and his swastikas and his parades, etc., and his death camps, are now eagerly racing to placate an organization whose sole purpose is to destroy Israel and destroy the Jewish people. It hasn't even been 100 years since the Holocaust. And the world is already back to its old tricks. Once again, the Jews are the most hated, loathed, and persecuted people on the face of the earth, no matter what they do. No matter how badly they are wronged, they are still blamed. And God, I don't understand it. There's not only no logic to it, there's no rationality to it. There's something magical about anti-Semitism. Something captivating. Something that draws people in. You remember seeing The Time Machine, don't you? Not the book, the movie. Where they have those air raid sirens go on and everybody, all the Eloi just start blindly marching in through the iron doors where they're going to get it by the Morlocks. Spooky stuff. But that's the way anti-Semitism seems to work. It just has this lock on people's minds. And to the Jews, to the people of Israel, the civilized world say, how dare you defend yourselves? How dare you assert national prerogatives that any other country in the world we would understand if they were attacked and brutalized in this fashion. They would fight back against their persecutors, their attackers, and we would understand and we would support them. But not you, you dirty Jews. Take it, shut up, endure, die. Oh, God. I don't understand it. And by God, I don't want to. Okay, a couple of minutes of commercials. Telephone number here is 831-265-5050.
You have to move now. No problem. Store your stuff at Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24/7 security. Drive it to your door and store it at Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
You sold your motorcycle to a friend in Fresno and need to deliver it. Well, Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul in Freedom has motorcycle and car trailers ready to go. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
Back in the 16th century, a famous prophet and psychic, Nostradamus, predicted great disasters. Hundreds of years later, believe it or not, a lot of his predictions have come true. Today we have another psychic and prophet among us. His name is Nostradamus. His great ability to predict when home repairs, primarily a roof, will become a much-needed thing is truly remarkable. His predictions have been renowned and recorded for many years now. Yes, Nostradamus can be found, a key owner at Knox Roofing, and he can give you accurate advice on when your roof will leak. His ability to see your home completed with only the best products and services is truly amazing. If you need a sitting with Nostradamus, all you need to do is call 461-0634, and you can receive a free reading of your home's life and its life-changing events about to occur. Okay, thanks, folks.
Cannabis is one of nature's most beneficial plants. Hello, I'm Jenna. Treehouse Dispensary, we use information about cannabis to build community. Listen to Xavier.
Thank you, Jenna. For those suffering joint pain, Treehouse suggests trying a CBD THC topical like the Balance Salve from local Santa Cruz company, Jade Nectar. Then enjoy the relief.
For answers to your cannabis questions, ask your friends at Treehouse Dispensary, 3651 Soquel Drive in Soquel, or ourtreehouse.io.
Okay, we're back live. I'm going to show today's column by Walter Russell Mead. Mead is a really very fine historian and a man who brings perspective to such issues. Israel's brutal war against Hamas is the greatest ordeal the Israelis and the Palestinians alike in more than 100 years of struggle between the Zionist movement and its opponents. From the scenes of barbarity that gleeful Hamas terrorists uploaded onto the web in October 2023, to today's images of terror in Gaza as the Israeli counteroffensive grinds on, the war has broadcast portraits of human suffering to the world. Propagandists on all sides have sought to use the emotions, the conflict, and the sufferings roused to shape public realities in Israel, Gaza, and around the world. If the Israelis are winning battles on the ground, the Palestinians have been more successful globally in the war for hearts and minds. The announcements that key Western countries and American allies, including Great Britain, France, Australia, and Canada, are now recognizing a Palestinian state demonstrate the war's effect on public opinion in those countries. In the U.S., the war has contributed to increased alienation from Israel among Democrats. It's also stoking waves of ugly anti-Semitism from the left and the far right. Friends of Israel argue that the global outrage is misplaced. Hamas was the aggressor and can stop the war any time by releasing the hostages and giving up remaining control in Gaza. Further, the outrage against Israel, fanned by a resourceful and utterly dishonest propaganda machine that often mixes fake news and biased reports to exaggerate and fabricate stories of Israeli cruelty, benefits from a global double standard. The atrocities and horrors of the Sudanese civil war dwarf anything happening in Gaza. And the world yawns. One doesn't have to be a Jew-hating bigot to oppose Israel's war in Gaza, or to support a ceasefire, even if it leaves Hamas in place. To be saddened by the human suffering in Gaza is neither immoral nor anti-Semitic, and there are strong policy and prudential arguments against the course of action the Israelis have followed, on which reasonable people can and do disagree. But the Western leaders who flaunt their self-perceived moral purity as they condemn Israel forget the foundations on which they stand. Today's liberal, rules-based Western order is the product of a far bloodier history than anything Israelis have done or even could do in Gaza. The liberal world order, whose fruits modern Europeans have enjoyed for so long, is grounded on Allied victory in World War II. The Allies, like the Israelis, weren't the aggressors in that war, but in their efforts to extirpate the scourges of Nazi nihilism and Japanese militarism, they killed as many as 3 German and another 1 million Japanese civilians. They created mass homelessness, destroyed some of the world's greatest cultural and religious monuments, disrupted medical and educational services, and subjected millions to ethnic cleansing on an unprecedented scale. Franklin D. Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and British Labour leader Clement Attlee scoffed at suggestions that the Allies provide humanitarian aid to enemy civilians while the war continued. As the British Foreign Office reminded Lord Lothian, its ambassador to the United States, supplies admitted to the occupied territories either fall into enemy hands or release other supplies for the enemy. Those who criticize Israel for demanding the return of all hostages as the price of a ceasefire forget that Allied demands for unconditional surrender had much bloodier consequences in World War II. Those demands were issued in full knowledge that they would likely prolong the war and increase civilian suffering, but FDR thought this might be a feature rather than a bug. The Germans, in his view, had been willing to venture another world war because the first one had ended without any serious fighting inside Germany itself. Real peace would come only if the Germans and the Japanese had the spirit of resistance beaten out of them. As for ethnic cleansing, more than 11 million Germans were forced from their long-term homes in Poland and Czechoslovakia after the guns fell silent, often in winter amid terrible shortages of food, medicine, and safe water. War is cruelty, said General William Tecumseh Sherman in writing the mayor of Atlanta as he prepared to devastate the fallen city. And you cannot refine it. And those who brought war into our country deserve all the curses and maledictions a people can pour out. Imagine that. War is hell. If you bring hell, you get hell. How just? How rational? That was true in 1864. It was still true in 1945, and it remains so today. Israel faces genuinely hellish choices in Gaza. But Western leaders who insist that Israel's actions are historically unprecedented and morally unjustified bear an ignorance of history and an unseriousness of purpose that raise fundamental questions about their fitness for the offices they hold. Nicely put, Mr. Meade. I'm Charles Freedman. Time's 9:42. This is the Charles Freedman program on Santa Cruz Voice. The telephone number to reach this program and make your voice heard is 831-265-5050. 265-5050. And telephone lines are open. I got the screen up, so I can't say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I'm watching. And I would be only too happy to hear from you. I don't know, what more can I say on this issue? The idea that civilized countries, supposedly civilized countries, would reward aggressors for launching war, particularly launching war in such a terroristic fashion, compared with at least once a month, I see on television once again images of the attack on Pearl Harbor. In the course of watching something that I'm looking at, there goes the Arizona again. Those images are kept fresh, and believe me, throughout the war, those images were kept fresh. The Japanese were excoriated. What did they do? A surprise attack. They stabbed our boys in the back. On a Sunday morning, while they had a peace delegation in Washington talking about how we could accommodate and how we could... And those people running that peace delegation, those diplomats in Washington, they knew that 6 Japanese aircraft carriers had already weighed anchor and set sail through the northern Pacific to reach the position from which they would annihilate the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. President Roosevelt, in his address to Congress the next day, described it as an unprovoked and dastardly attack, and said that since the time of that attack, a state of war has existed between the United States of America and the Japanese Empire. And Congress promptly voted to ratify that war declaration with only one single vote against. Good old Jeanette Rankin. At the next election, her constituents put her out of office. They were not interested in her absolute commitment to pacifism. They understood what you do when you're attacked. You fight back. When I think of the Pearl Harbor attack, and I've read a considerable amount about it, of course, the real story, there's a book called Day of Infamy that was written by Walter Lord. It was on the shelf in my house when I was growing up. I still have the same copy. I've read it more than once over the years. And it talks about what happened that day, how the attack was carried out, and what the consequences of it were. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. They attacked Hickam Field, Bellows Field, Army Air Force bases. They attacked military targets. Their bullets flew and their bombs fell at uniformed American soldiers and sailors and airmen. It was a surprise attack, but at least the people they surprised were capable of fighting back, and indeed, the Japanese lost 15 or 20 planes that day because the Americans fought back. I don't believe there were any Hamas terrorists killed on October 7th, 2023. When the Hamas terrorists hang glided in and burst out of their tunnels, they didn't attack military installations. They didn't go up against anybody who could fight back. No, they went to a music festival. They attacked women, children, and old people. Defenseless civilians. And they didn't simply shoot them or blow them up with a bomb. No, they were more exotic. The women they raped. The children, they smashed their heads against walls. In the days after December 7th, 1941, the slogan, "Remember Pearl Harbor," swept this country. The effect of it was best summed up by the Commander-in-Chief of the Japanese Navy, the Imperial Combined Fleet, Admiral Yamamoto Isoroku, who had lived and studied in the United States, and unlike almost all other Japanese, was not so insular, did understand the nature and the reality of the country we were fighting. Admiral Yamamoto said, "I fear all we have accomplished is to awaken a sleeping giant and to fill him with a terrible resolve." Yamamoto was the architect of that attack. He had advised against it, but he was overruled. His superiors told him, no, this is what you're ordered to do. You do it. Yamamoto was a man in uniform. These were his orders, and he carried them out, even as he knew what would happen. In Israel today, remember October 7th should be a slogan. I don't know if it is or not. But one other thing I forgot to mention. The Japanese did not seize hostages and transport them back to the home islands to be held in unspeakable conditions, so bad that the remaining hostages, 60% of whom are now dead. No, Hamas did that. Hamas makes the Japanese militarists look good, decent, upright. They waged war. Hamas wages bestiality. For their trouble, the Japanese were utterly defeated, driven back to their home islands, and then, when they still refused to surrender, subjected to atomic attack for the first and only time any people ever has been, for the purpose of making it clear it's over. Now is the time to surrender. And that unconditional surrender finally took place. In the time since then, people whom we were formerly at that bloody life and death struggle with, have since become some of the best friends we have in the world. Japan for many years has been a stalwart foundation block of the Western Alliance. A bulwark against the spread of communism and of barbarianism in the Western Pacific. I wonder if it would be possible. And the Japanese were very fanatical. Hamas is very fanatical. Perhaps there is a point at which Hamas could be so thoroughly defeated, so utterly beaten, that they would finally, the remaining ones would finally say, maybe this isn't the way to go. Maybe we can have a better life for ourselves and our children and our families by following another path. Frankly, I don't see that. The Japanese were rational actors. They were following evil leaders, as did the Germans, but they were still rational actors. They loved their children more than they hated the Americans. I don't see that kind of rationality when I look at Hamas. These are people who are utterly and completely consumed by their hatred. It is what they cling to. These are people who strap bombs to toddlers and then send these poor helpless victims into crowded venues, bus stations, pizza parlors, wherever there are a lot of Jews, so that when the child explodes, it can take a lot of Jews with it. And this is celebrated. And anyone who does this, any family that does this, much veneration and cash. Yeah, big monetary rewards. You want a big payday? Take your son. Strap a bomb to him and have him blow himself up. This is just so sick, so insane. And you always hear, well, on both sides. I know of no Israelis who have this kind of hatred for the Arabs, for Islam. There are Arabs, Muslims living in Israel. There are mosques in Israel where people gather to worship every week. It is a one-way street. The blind, raging, insane hatred is a one-way street. This particular one-way street is a street which only lunatics should travel. People so blinded by their hatred that their rationality is gone. People so blinded by hatred that I, as a rational human being, have real difficulty even understanding what makes them tick. I'm sitting here thinking about it right now, and my mind wants to reject it. This kind of utter bestiality, lack of humanity. I can't fathom it. And when I'm brought face to face with it, I recoil. I'm horrified. I'm frightened. I'm revolted. I'm also thousands of miles away. Now, once again, I practice an age-old custom. Try to put yourself in the other fellow's shoes. Try to think of yourself as a citizen of Israel. One morning you pick up your newspaper and you read that several hundred of your friends and relatives and acquaintances have been savaged by Hamas, and they're posting it online, smiling and laughing as they hold up severed heads. Revulsion? Anger? And then you read the last paragraph. Oh my God, they took hostages. Oh my God, they took innocent people with them back to their spider holes. What are we going to do? We're going to get those hostages back. That's what we're going to do. Those are our people. And among our families, we do love our children more than anything. We want them back. Dead or alive, we want them back. Hamas says, hell no. You can't have them back. You know, if they were to return those hostages, peace would break out. Oh, the Israeli government wouldn't like it. See, Benjamin Netanyahu and the current Israeli administration, they see with clear eyes. They understand the nature of Hamas. And right now, I believe that, just between you and me and the deep blue sea, I think they're probably happy that Hamas continues to hold the hostages, because that gives them an excuse to continue to reduce Hamas. What if Hamas released the hostages right now? Just turn them all. Say, here you are. You can have them back. Israel would be unable to continue its military program against Hamas. That would be the end of it right there. It would have to be because the Israeli people would demand it. They'd say, okay, we have our hostages back. That's enough. It's over. Hamas could have that victory. But again, they are so consumed by their hatred that they would rather hold hostages, even dead ones. The sheer evil of Hamas is beyond the capacity of sane, rational people to comprehend. And frankly, I think that's a good thing. I don't think I want to comprehend anything quite that awful. I think it would hurt my brain. And I've only got so much of it left. The time is 10 o'clock. I'll be back in 6 minutes with more on the Charles Freedman radio program. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Okay.
This is one of my favorite little gifts to give. It looks so simple and elegant, and I love how it has that vintage look.
There was a time in my life when I was angry, bitter, and deeply unhappy. I wanted to lash out at the whole fascist system, the greedy, heartless power structure that didn't care about me or the rest of society's innocent victims. A system that had robbed, beaten, and stolen from my ancestors. The whole corrupt edifice deserved to be brought down, reduced to rubble. I was a perfect recruit for Antifa, the left-wing group which claims to fight against fascism. And so, I became a member. Now I was one of those who had the guts to fight against the fascists who were exploiting disadvantaged people. I wasn't a card-carrying anti-fascist. There's no such thing as an official Antifa membership. But I was ready at a moment's notice to slip on the black mask and march in what Antifa calls the Black Bloc. a cadre of other black-clad Antifa members to taunt police and destroy property. Antifa stands for anti-fascist, but that's purposely deceptive. For one thing, the very name is calibrated so that anyone who dares to criticize the group or its tactics can be labeled fascist. This allows Antifa to justify violence against all who dare stand up or speak out against them. A few groups boldly declare themselves Antifa, like Rose City Antifa in Portland, but most don't, preferring to avoid the negative publicity. That's part of Antifa's appeal and strength. It's hard to pin down. There is no identifiable leader. To be part of Antifa, you must adopt two basic principles. First, you have to have the mentality of an anti-fascist. And second, you must be willing to enforce that mentality. To adopt an anti-fascist mentality means to reject everything that is fascism. But that begs the question, what is fascism? While most Americans associate fascism with Nazi Germany or modern dictatorial states like Venezuela, China, and North Korea, to Antifa, fascism means Judeo-Christian values and capitalism. As an Antifa group said on its Twitter account in 2018, the fight against fascism is only won when the capitalist system is smashed, and they mean smashed. Breaking windows, tearing down statues, throwing Molotov cocktails, looting and burning businesses, and harassing and physically assaulting people. We saw it all in the summer of 2020 in Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, and other cities. Antifa is not solely responsible for all left-wing political violence. Not every attack by left-wing radicals is an Antifa attack. But Antifa exemplifies the worst of this dangerous ideology, which is becoming bolder and more prevalent in American society. Joining Antifa was the worst decision of my life. How did I get out of it? Like anyone who gets out of something bad, I encountered something good. The very system that I had sought to destroy, friends, people who turned out to be my real friends, pointed me to challenging thinkers like Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, and Ben Shapiro, and eventually organizations like the Leadership Institute and PragerU. What they said just made sense and offered me a better way to live. Antifa and the radical left did not care about building a better society. They cared about control. They could only offer me more anger, bitterness, and unhappiness. I always expected to keep my past a secret. But as I saw cities around the country struggling against the rise of left-wing political violence, while left-wing and even liberal politicians said nothing, I knew I had to speak up. If people like me, who know what is really behind Antifa, don't, the left will obliterate what it means to be a free American. So here I am. And here's my message. Young people don't drift to the left because they believe the left is superior. Most do because they have never been exposed to anything else. Leftism has become what Andrew Breitbart once described as the default position. The American idea is more powerful than you think. It turned me around. It can turn others around too. The core of that idea, call it the American dream, is not about money. It's about freedom. That, ultimately, is the reason Antifa has to resort to violence. Because if conservatives are allowed to speak freely, they will peacefully convert more and more of Antifa supporters towards the values of liberty, and then Antifa will vanish like the nightmare it is. I'm Gabriel Nadales, the student rights advocate for the Leadership Institute and author of Behind the Black Mask, My Time as an Antifa Activist for Prager University.
6:06. Hour number 2 begins. I'm Charles Freedman. It's News Talk time on Santa Cruz Voice. Once again, the telephone number 831-265-5050. You still have the ability to be today's first caller, so don't hesitate. Okay, I noticed that President Trump has just followed through on something that he had been talking about doing for some time. And you're probably wondering, well, now, are you going to be happy with it or unhappy with it? See, the thing is, with President Trump, you have to be willing to take each thing and each policy as it comes. And once again, he has done something which I think he deserves tremendous praise and thanks for. He has signed an executive order declaring the organization known as Antifa to be a terrorist organization. Now, frankly, it surprises me that this had not already been done. I mean, that the activities of Antifa, what they do, terrorism is a matter of actions. You don't get to be a terrorist by running your mouth. No, in order to be a terrorist, you have to actually blow things up, destroy things, see that actual people, human beings, are assaulted, murdered. This is serious business. Terrorism is not a walk in the park. And Antifa has taken unto itself the right to commit these atrocities. So they definitely deserve to be classified as a terrorist organization. And it's, I think, going to be rather difficult for an organized government to fight them because of the way they assemble themselves. I found something interesting here. This is a quick 5-minute video. It's called I Used to Be Antifa. And this is a PragerU video. And, well, just imagine a young man, former student, who became Antifa, took to the streets wearing the mask and smashing windows and doing all of those things, but who subsequently rethought his conclusions and walked away from Antifa. In other words, somebody who turned away from that terrorist organization and made his thinking right. Well, first of all, we're certainly grateful for such a person. We wish for many more. But this young man has the benefit of the experience he gathered as a member of Antifa. And so I'm going to play this for you. Again, it's only 5 minutes long. But as you listen to this young man describe Antifa, describe his own mindset as an Antifa activist, think about President Trump having designated Antifa a terrorist group. Justifiable or not?
There was a time in my life when I was angry, bitter, and deeply unhappy. I wanted to lash out at the whole fascist system, the greedy, heartless power structure that didn't care about me or the rest of society's innocent victims. A system that had robbed, beaten, and stolen from my ancestors. The whole corrupt edifice deserved to be brought down, reduced to rubble. I was a perfect recruit for Antifa, the left-wing group which claims to fight against fascism. And so, I became a member. Now I was one of those who had the guts to fight against the fascists who were exploiting disadvantaged people. I wasn't a card-carrying anti-fascist. There's no such thing as an official Antifa membership. But I was ready at a moment's notice to slip on the black mask and march in what Antifa calls the Black Bloc, a cadre of other black-clad Antifa members to taunt police and destroy property. Antifa stands for anti-fascist, but that's purposely deceptive. For one thing, the very name is calibrated so that anyone who dares to criticize the group or its tactics can be labeled fascist. This allows Antifa to justify violence against all who dare stand up or speak out against them. A few groups boldly declare themselves Antifa, like Rose City Antifa in Portland, but most don't, preferring to avoid the negative publicity. That's part of Antifa's appeal and strength. It's hard to pin down. There is no identifiable leader. To be part of Antifa, you must adopt two basic principles. First, you have to have the mentality of an anti-fascist. And second, you must be willing to enforce that mentality. To adopt an anti-fascist mentality means to reject everything that is fascism. But that begs the question, what is fascism? While most Americans associate fascism with Nazi Germany or modern dictatorial states like Venezuela, China, and North Korea, to Antifa, fascism means Judeo-Christian values and capitalism. As an Antifa group said on its Twitter account in 2018, the fight against fascism is only won when the capitalist system is smashed, and they mean smashed. Breaking windows, tearing down statues, throwing Molotov cocktails, looting and burning businesses, and harassing and physically assaulting people. We saw it all in the summer of 2020 in Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, and other cities. Antifa is not solely responsible for all left-wing political violence. Not every attack by left-wing radicals is an Antifa attack. But Antifa exemplifies the worst of this dangerous ideology, which is becoming bolder and more prevalent in American society. Joining Antifa was the worst decision of my life. How did I get out of it? Like anyone who gets out of something bad, I encountered something good. The very system that I had sought to destroy, friends, people who turned out to be my real friends, pointed me to challenging thinkers like Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, and Ben Shapiro, and eventually organizations like the Leadership Institute and PragerU. What they said just made sense and offered me a better way to live. Antifa and the radical left did not care about building a better society. They cared about control. They could only offer me more anger, bitterness, and unhappiness. I always expected to keep my past a secret. But as I saw cities around the country struggling against the rise of left-wing political violence, while left-wing and even liberal politicians said nothing, I knew I had to speak up. If people like me, who know what is really behind Antifa, don't, the left will obliterate what it means to be a free American. So here I am. And here's my message. Young people don't drift to the left because they believe the left is superior. Most do because they have never been exposed to anything else. Leftism has become what Andrew Breitbart once described as the default position. The American idea is more powerful than you think. It turned me around. It can turn others around too. The core of that idea, call it the American dream, is not about money. It's about freedom. That, ultimately, is the reason Antifa has to resort to violence. Because if conservatives are allowed to speak freely, they will peacefully convert more and more of Antifa supporters towards the values of liberty, and then Antifa will vanish like the nightmare it is. I'm Gabriel Nadales, the student rights advocate for the Leadership Institute and author of Behind the Black Mask, My Time as an Antifa Activist for Prager University.
Well, there you have it, a very succinct summary of just exactly what Antifa is, how it operates, and the danger it poses. So was President Trump correct in designating Antifa a terrorist organization? I'll share my own particular answer. I think so. I believe Mr. Trump acted correctly here. I believe that organizations that are willing and whose modus operandi is street violence. It's interesting. They call themselves anti-fascist, but as I look back in history, I see their tactics as being basically the same as the brown shirts and black shirts of Europe who helped install Hitler and Mussolini. To merely call yourself anti-fascist doesn't mean you're not a fascist. And the conduct, judge people not by what they call themselves, but by their conduct. If somebody says he's nonviolent, but he's busy beating you on the head with a hammer, then maybe he's not speaking the truth. Maybe he isn't really nonviolent. Maybe he's just trying to present himself as nonviolent. Maybe he's just trying to get intellectually lazy and non-observant people to accept the idea that he's nonviolent. But he's not, because he's busy beating you over the head. This strikes me as what Antifa is all about. They say they're anti-fascist, but the tactics they pursue, and as Mr. Naves pointed out, they're looking for control. Who wants control? Fascists. This was the model of dictatorial states. It still is. Contemporary example of a fascist dictator, Vladimir Putin. Try going to Russia and talking about what a bad guy Putin is and how awful his war in Ukraine is. Next thing you know, they'll be picking up your remains off the sidewalk because you fell out of a window. Yeah, that's right. Go ahead and laugh because you know it's true. You know it's true. You've read about it. And it's happened often enough now to where it's no longer an isolated incident. No, it's a thing. That's why I just made that funny joke about it. This is why people don't like me, because I make funny jokes about people getting thrown out of windows and splashed all over the sidewalk. But sometimes that's the only way to get people's attention. And Vladimir Putin, after all, he's a funny man. That's what he does for laughs. That's fascism. You go along, or we will force you, we will coerce you. And if we can't coerce you, we'll kill you. That's the ultimate fascism. And Antifa, if they, one of the things that we learned here, they have no program. They're nihilists. They want to break down the order of capitalism in America. What do they want to replace it with? They have no bloody idea. Do you remember a few years ago when Antifa actually took over a few downtown city blocks in Seattle? And said, well, we won't permit police in here or anything like this. People died in there. See, yeah, Antifa's a death cult. It really is. They don't care about human beings. They care about their control. What happened after that, as I recall, King County actually elected a Republican district attorney, or some electoral revolution took place there. The Republicans were elected to the city council. I believe one became mayor. And indeed, Seattle has not had its name in the paper quite as often over the past few years. It's too bad, because most people, you say Seattle and they have pictures of this Antifa atrocity. It takes a while once people have built up this idea in their minds that, oh, well, a given city is a preserve of lawlessness. Once that reputation has been developed, it takes some time to replace it with a more positive image. Oh, that's a great place to go. Great place to do business, great place to be a tourist. Go up there and have lunch in the Space Needle. Wouldn't that be cool? Seattle is now busy trying to rehabilitate itself. I wish them well. Closer to home, Mayor Lurie in San Francisco is trying to rehabilitate that city. I don't notice that Antifa has stormed the streets of San Francisco. I wonder what would happen if they tried it. I think Mayor Lurie would deal with them rather peremptorily, because he is about the business of trying to rebuild San Francisco's reputation as a destination for business and for pleasure. I wish him well. I really do. I'm not irrational. I want the best outcomes, not the worst. But in order to achieve that, the people who want the worst outcomes, and there are some, have to be opposed. They have to be opposed. When Donald Trump undertakes to classify, to officially designate Antifa as a terrorist organization, he is taking a step, one more step down that road to normalization of conditions in our society. What do I mean by normalization? Safety and cleanliness. You know, I set a low bar. You know me, I've never been a utopian. I don't expect perfect outcomes. I know better. But the idea that our cities, where so many of us live and work, our society's what now? 90% urbanized? Most of us don't live on the countryside anymore. 100 years ago, yeah, a little over 100 years ago, it was 50-50. That was when the ratio of urban to rural dwellers finally tipped in favor of urban. This was, again, a century ago. Since that time, that trend has only accelerated. There is no reason why urban environments should not be clean and safe. Urban environments should be clean and safe. Again, this is where so many of us live and work. Fit for human habitation. Fit for people to live in. Every once in a while, something brings it home to me. I will never forget, this was several years ago, I read that on the south side of Chicago, mothers put their babies to bed in the bathtub. Oh, there's no water in there. You know, they're not trying to give the kids pneumonia or keep them up with water torture. No, tucked in, nice, warm and cozy in the bathtub. Now you ask, why would a mother do that? Well, in case a random bullet from a street shooting comes through the window or through the wall. If the child is in the bathtub, it'll be safe because that iron bathtub will stop a bullet. Another one of those incidents where I just had to shake my head and say, I can't comprehend it. When I was a child, growing up in Modesto, nothing could have been further from the idea. We walked the streets. We went to McHenry Village, walked down 10th Street. In perfect safety. Never worried about anything like that. Oh, was there crime in Modesto? I'm sure there was. But it was kept to such a low level. And the overwhelming number of people were decent, honest people that you simply didn't think about that. That wasn't a concern. There are plenty of American cities today where the possibility of criminal activity is a very real concern. Before you go out on the street, you're thinking, what's going to happen to me? Will I be lucky today? And not run into somebody who's going to go through my pockets, at best, or clobber me at worst. Mayor Lurie is trying to reestablish that kind of order in the city of San Francisco. And then you have mayors like Brandon Johnson and Karen Bass here in Los Angeles. They don't seem to get it. They seem to think that their job as mayor is to defend criminals, to defend their prerogatives, to keep them out of jail, to allow them to practice their business model. Maybe they see their business model as somehow preferable to that of the honest merchant, who is, after all, a capitalist, doing what they do in order to make a profit, i.e., earn a living. That's praiseworthy activity, but not to some, not to Antifa, a person who goes to work every day for the purpose of serving other people's needs and thereby earning a living for himself, is either a dupe of the capitalist system or worse, an evil capitalist oppressor. My God, how twisted do people have to get? Well, once again, Mr. Trump, thank you very much for making official government policy out of something that we all knew was true for some time. Antifa is a terrorist organization. And it's just fine that you say so. At 10:28, I'm Charles Freedman, again looking for today's first phone call. Take a chance. I don't bite.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top-quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the all-new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
If you're between the ages of 49 and 63 and can't go back to your job because of a physical or mental disability, Social Security could pay you as much as $3,800 a month. Call the Social Security Disability Helpline. Our team will give you a free case review and explain to you how much money you're entitled to. And you won't pay anything unless we get you benefits. Call now.
800-610-7840. That's 800-610-7840.
You can help build one of America's first full-service local news and talk streaming radio stations. SantaCruzVoice.com. You can help the Voice team build a streaming radio infrastructure of hardware, software, and connectivity by donating your time and or money. Your donations will result in a radio station that everyone will enjoy and that you can truly be proud of. Please go to SantaCruzVoice.com and click support. SantaCruzVoice.com, and thank you.
You need a clean, pleasant space to conduct business, but you don't want the burden of a long, expensive lease. Your solution is Satellite Co-working and Digital Media Studio on Soquel Avenue. Satellite offers private offices, meeting and conference rooms, even co-working by the hour, day, week, or month. Schedule a tour at satellitecoworking.com. Mention Santa Cruz Voice for 20% off your first reservation.
At 10:30, you are in tune with the Charles Freedman radio program News Talk on SantaCruzVoice.com. Today, Jonathan Turley has another post online on Real Clear Politics. He has a book out, a recent book, on the topic of freedom of speech, the indispensable right, free speech in an age of rage. My dear wife bought this book for me and gifted me with it, and so that motivated me to actually read the book, and I was enriched thereby. Jonathan Turley is a professor of public interest law at Washington University, so he is an expert on our American legal system and legal history, and he brought that knowledge and that experience to bear in writing his book. Today, he turns that knowledge and that judgment on the case of Jimmy Kimmel's suspension from broadcasting. Democrats were finally outraged this week. No, it wasn't about the murder of Charlie Kirk, but rather the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel's late-night comedy show. Mr. Turley looks at this in a very interesting way. Democratic leaders are taking to the airwaves to denounce the decision to take Kimmel off the air after he spread disinformation about Charlie Kirk's alleged killer. The same leaders and pundits who for years have fought for censorship in the name of combating disinformation are now making the very arguments they ridiculed just months ago. We see this so often in American public life today. The only question seems to be not, is a policy correct or is an idea correct or not? No, it's who is saying it or who is doing it. You tell me who the person is, who the actor is, and then I'll tell you whether it's good or not. Do you see the insanity of that? Do you see how ridiculous that is? Abrogation of free speech is okay when the left does it. But now that people on the right are doing it, all of a sudden it's a problem. It was a problem right along, and it remains one. Democrats once wrote letters to internet carriers suggesting that Fox News, the most popular cable news network, should be taken off the air in the name of combating disinformation. That was when Democrats controlled the White House, and they were targeting conservatives. Suddenly, now, disinformation is no longer a valid reason to censor, and alleged government corporate alliances are a menace to free speech. After the tragedy in Utah, many on the left immediately tried to deflect responsibility for the murder by claiming that Charlie Kirk's killer was actually a Trump supporter. On his program, Jimmy Kimmel declared that the MAGA gang was desperately trying to characterize the kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything they can to score political points from it. The far-left motivations of the alleged assassin, Tyler Robinson, were already well known. His family confirmed he'd been radicalized with leftist ideology and cited pro-transgender views. This wasn't a joke. It was a false, factual claim made by Kimmel on national television, and it came at a time when others were spreading this lie. Despite stories to the contrary, many repeated the false claim. For example, Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe posted that Kirk's apparent assassination seems to have been ultra-MAGA, exploding the GOP MAGA attempt to pin the blame for this tragedy on liberals. Previously, Professor Tribe had claimed that the October 23 massacre of Israelis by Hamas was a wag-the-dog operation designed to distract from corruption allegations against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This disinformation took hold on the internet and social media. One poll showed that a plurality of Americans think Tyler Robinson was a conservative. Call it assassination denial. It's all the rage. Former MSNBC and ESPN host Keith Olbermann, he is a loon, wrote after Kimmel's suspension, "Burn in hell, Sinclair Broadcasting," alongside Charlie Kirk. He added that nothing Kimmel said was untrue. Curiously, some of these politicians and pundits are claiming that yet again democracy will die if Kimmel is not allowed to spread disinformation. There are reports that Kimmel was refusing to apologize and planned to double down on attacks on conservatives in his next show. Faced with a revolt by affiliate and a potential exodus of advertisers, Disney's Bob Iger pulled the plug. By the way, Kimmel's ratings have been falling for some time, and he had a smaller audience than the Colbert Show, which was itself discontinued due to loss of money. This hypocrisy was pure comedy. For years, these same voices, demanded censorship of individuals deemed to be spreading disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. The last category was used by the Biden administration to target statements that based on fact, but used out of context, to mislead, harm, or manipulate. At the same time, they mocked claims that corporations were working with the government to maintain this censorship system. Senator Elizabeth Warren ran on a pledge to impose new criminal and civil penalties for anyone spreading disinformation. Now, however, censorship is intolerable. Warren told CNN, "We know there was federal interference. We saw the government step up and give a hard shove. Then we saw a compliant company turn around and suspend Mr. Kimmel." She added, "His collaboration with corporations truly undermines the whole premise of the First Amendment." Senator Adam Schiff of California called the suspension one of the most blatant attacks on the free press in American history. Schiff had previously demanded that Twitter suspend an array of users and reduce the visibility of blacklisted individuals, including a journalist who held opposing views. When Elon Musk reduced censorship at X, it was Schiff who warned Facebook not to follow his example by restoring free speech protections. Schiff threatened legislative action if the company moved to alter or roll back certain misinformation policies. This week, Schiff is outraged by a company's decision to suspend a host who refused to correct a false story he had spread. For years, I appeared before these same leaders in Congress as they defended corporate censorship and dismissed allegations of collaboration with the government. I would not cancel Kimmel so long as his show was profitable, but I've long maintained that companies can limit the free speech of employees at work. I don't believe Kimmel should be censored on social media for spreading false information. At the same time, ABC does not have to lose money or viewers because an employee attacks others with vile, false claims. Now, Disney is accused of killing democracy itself. In league with Trump, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut attacked Trump for trying to destroy our democracy, acting like many would-be despots. Representative Max Frost, Democrat of Florida, used Kimmel's suspension as evidence that fascism is not on the way, it's here. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz insisted that suspending a host for spreading false information about a murder was North Korea-style stuff. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer insisted it's what Putin would do. It's a curious spin since Putin and Kim are value media figures who spread information, particularly about murders. Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, went so far as to compare Kimmel to Thomas Paine, the author of Common Sense, penman of the Revolution. So Kimmel is now a hero of democracy. All he had to do was spread false information. That makes this the funniest joke that Kimmel never told. So writes Jonathan Turley. It's bad enough, and it has, it's just appalling to watch people who used to argue for censorship now arguing for free speech, not because they believe in it. They obviously don't believe in it. But simply because now their nonsense is being disputed. During the period of the Biden administration, we had a very poor 4 years for freedom of speech. We had government officials colluding with, coercing people who own social media platforms to attenuate, to end people's freedom of speech. These social media platforms are supposed to be free speech platforms, places where people can say what they want to say. Now, I can see that certain very basic, very well-defined limitations might be placed. Threats, incitements to violence, those, yes. But the idea that some government official somewhere would decide what is and is not misinformation. You see, this has always been the problem. This is why the Free Speech Amendment, the First Amendment, exists in our Constitution. Because even back then, 250 years ago, wise men were asking, well, if we're going to have censorship, who does the job? And as always, if I get to be the censor, it's fine. But I don't want anybody else doing the job. I think, let me see. Evan, is this you?
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
Yes, thank you, Charles, for taking my call. Yeah, we were on the topic of free speech yesterday. I wanted to kind of point out the fact that we have Labor Code sections 1101 and 1102. Employers cannot control or direct employers' political activities. It's illegal to retaliate against an employee for their political beliefs or actions, such as attending protests or rallies, writing op-eds or social media posts, or supporting or opposing candidates or causes. Thank God we have some laws. But I wanted to kind of talk about Jimmy Kimmel for 2 seconds, because you were kind of on with him. I find him more of a, I don't know, not a political person. I find him more of a, he does comedy. Granted, he seemed to have gotten it's kind of interesting. I was reading, I guess he has an honorary degree awarded him from a doctorate recognition of his success in television and comedy, I guess in 2013.
That's actually kind of funny.
Interesting. And then real quick, it's kind of interesting too, Newsom put in a lot of judges, and I'm kind of wondering about your thoughts on that, sir. I guess he put like 15 new superior judges in just recently, within like a week or so. Wasn't sure if you knew that.
No, I don't know anything about that. Mr. Newsom does a lot of things that I'm not familiar with. Yesterday we did have, I believe it was yesterday, we had a story on the governor doing an about-face on many of the more maniacal and counterproductive climate hysteria bills that he has and policies that he's pursued. Now that refineries are beginning to close in the state of California, and it looks like gasoline prices might spike even further, Mr. Newsom is reacting to the laws of economic gravity by signing measures to enable more oil production in the state of California and to hopefully keep refineries operating in the state of California. Amazing. I'm very glad to see that. Reality sometimes does bite. Getting back to the issue of freedom of speech, talking about Jimmy Kimmel, I'm a free speech hawk. Mr. Kimmel put out a story on his program that was palpably false. But hey, people say things all the time that aren't true. The one thing I'm curious about, and nobody's talked about this yet, is Mr. Kimmel himself aware that what he said was false. You see, sometimes people say things that are false without knowing it. It's called being wrong or making a mistake, and we all do that. But it could be that Jimmy Kimmel actually believes what he said, and if that's the case, then he is simply in error. Again, anybody can do that. Maybe he knows that what he said was nonsense and simply said it for political purposes. That would make him a liar. But once again, lying is protected speech under the First Amendment. I had a problem a few days ago when Brendan Carr used his position as head of the FCC to deliver pressure to get Kimmel off the air. That's not what government should be about. But Mr. Carr, it seems to me, may have learned this tactic and technique from the previous administration, where it was de rigueur for government officials to bring pressure and coercion on people controlling social media platforms, etc., to suppress speech they didn't like. And we saw the proof of this when Elon Musk acquired Twitter and published the emails that documented the entire thing. So far as free speech is concerned, neither side comes out of this with a good, clean record. You know, you're looking for the guy wearing the white hat, the hero, the guy you could cheer for, and you don't see him. And that's a shame, because free speech is a bedrock of our free society, of our constitutional republic. And the idea that now the only people who support free speech are the people who, at that particular time or moment, happen to be well served by it, well, that's appalling. Whatever happened to, I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. I was familiar with that quotation when I was a child in school. And it made all the sense in the world to me then. It still does today. The idea that, if Jimmy Kimmel wants to get up and say that it was some MAGA troglodyte who shot Charlie Kirk, well, he's full of beans. But, hey, he has the right to say it. The only reason he should be, or could be, justifiably pulled off the air is because his network sees, hey, we're losing a lot of money, you're getting lousy ratings, you're out of here. And that's the business that he's in, and he knows that.
And I 100% agreed with you there yesterday. Now, again, we may have had a little bit of disagreement with the First Amendment, and you had a great caller that called in after me, talking about he had a business and his trucks, and he doesn't allow any political stuff on his trucks, and I 100% agree with that. When you have a business, you need to be a lot more neutral and bring everybody in. So I'd like to kind of, comment on your caller that called in and say I appreciate it for him calling in one more time, too. And real quick, you did say Newsom and I guess helping our oil, correct? Can you elaborate a little bit more one more time about that, sir?
Well, I had a piece about it that I read yesterday, but basically the governor has now signed acts by the legislature, which he backed and he steered through, which will make it, which will facilitate rezonings in Kern County that will enable additional petroleum production. Kern County is the oil patch of California. Not that long ago, California produced basically all the fossil fuel we needed right here in the state. Today, we're only producing a quarter of what we need. That's ridiculous. And instead, we're purchasing imported oil. Some of it's brought in from Alaska. Some of it's brought in from the Middle East. So we're buying oil from Saudi Arabia and places like that when we've got plenty of our own. That's crazy. So Governor Newsom has, he's running for president. This is the bottom line here. Governor Newsom sees himself as a presidential candidate. Okay, that means that people are going to be looking at California and saying, well, what kind of a job did Governor Newsom do in California? And frankly, the idea that people here are paying $1.50 a gallon more than people in other states for gasoline, this isn't a positive argument. It's the kind of thing that could be used to pillory him. So he is attempting now at this late date to try to dial back a little bit on his environmental and climate hysteria, which is, we have to do everything, no matter what it costs or anything else, everything that comes along that somebody says will affect climate change, we have to do. Well, that's like electing Greta Thunberg, governor of California. You don't do that. And reality is beginning to bite Governor Newsom. So I'm glad to see that he's taking account of that and beginning to sign some measures that will help reduce the pressure on prices for oil and gas and prices for electricity in the state of California. Now we'll just have to see how well it works.
Maybe he changes his affiliation to Republican. But anyway, that's kind of a crazy thought process of mine.
I'll tell you what. If Gavin Newsom is a bright, articulate guy, if he were to wake up tomorrow morning and suddenly see things the way, for example, I do, and decide, well, I'm going to simply, I'm leaving the Democratic Party, I'm going to become a Republican, I would be delighted to have him. But that's not going to happen.
Me too. And real quick here, I guess Newsom puts 25% cannabis tax hike on hold amid the industry struggles too. So there's one thing I'm kind of agreeable with him on that front. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. You got your 10 minutes back, sir. So you have a great rest of your show.
Have a good day.
You too.
Well, I didn't realize, I don't follow cannabis taxes that closely. For years I was a supporter of treating marijuana the same as alcohol, or same as alcohol. Sell it over the counter to anybody over the age of 21 with the price of purchase. And I thought that by doing this, prices would decline rapidly, and you would wind up putting cartels and criminals and dishonest actors, criminals, out of business, because there would no longer be the profit that they considered necessary. They like to make a really large profit margin. Criminals are greedy. They really are. And so in California, anyway, legalization has come along. It still hasn't come along at the federal level, which this inconsistency makes it very difficult for people who are in that business. Many of them find it impossible to get banking services because they say, well, at any odd moment, the federal government could simply sweep in and accuse the bank of facilitating drug trafficking. And, it's a legal morass. This is what comes of ignoring the law. And one of our greatest presidents, Abraham Lincoln, once said, the best way to get a bad law changed is to enforce it strictly. Now think about that. The best way to get a bad law changed is to enforce it strictly. Yeah, you can see the logic of that, can't you? If it's a bad law, and all of a sudden it's being enforced rigidly, then people are going to scream, hey, change this. They're going to write their congressman or their state legislator, depending on whether it's a state law or a federal law, and they're going to say, this is ridiculous. Do something about this. I don't know why we now find ourselves in this position. It's kind of like with immigration. We've always had federal immigration law. It has always been the supreme law of the land in that regard. Immigration is a federal preserve. And yet, 50 or so years ago, we started having cities decide that they would be sanctuaries and that they would no longer participate in enforcing immigration laws. And federal administration should have come down on that like a ton of bricks right at the outset. No, you don't get to do that. Over the years, I guess, marijuana has become so pervasive in society that for the federal government to attempt to enforce its prohibition, after all, marijuana by the federal government is still considered the same as heroin. I mean, this is bad stuff. Is that policy reasonable? I've never thought it was. I still don't. I believe the other day President Trump said something about maybe changing the legal classification assigned to marijuana. That would be a perfectly reasonable idea. But the problem now is that the marijuana that's out in the marketplace today is so much stronger and so much more potent than what was around when I was a younger person. Well, it's a different ballgame. I've read articles to the fact that, this modern, very strong marijuana actually has mind-bending capabilities that the older, less potent stuff didn't have. And given the difference in degrees of potency, makes perfect sense to me. But under the law, it's all marijuana, so if you're going to make it legal, then the extra potent stuff we have now becomes legal. Let me see here. We have a telephone caller with 5 minutes left in the hour. How many times do I tell people call earlier? Oh, well, maybe he was in the bathroom. Hi there. How are you doing?
Hi, Charles. Shoot. No, I didn't pay attention to the time. Doggone it. Should I call back later, or?
Well, we can start the.
Or should I just go?
We can begin the conversation now, and if you have 6 minutes, I can just hold you on through the break. But anyway, what's on your mind?
Oh, okay. So I don't know. I had to miss a section of your show. I apologize. I had to run in the lumberyard. But did you hear Trump's speech to the UN or snippets of it?
No, I did not. I'm hoping that he gave them an earful.
Oh, he did. He, lately I've been kind of upset with Trump for the same reasons you've been, and also that Supreme Court thing on September 8th. But anyway, he almost made up for it with his speech, in my eyes. He just, bludgeoned them with common sense. Like he talked a lot about the Green New Deal, or he called it the Green New Scam. You know how Trump does.
Mm-hmm.
And, which it is. I agree with that. And just, one point he made, here you were talking about Gavin Newsom, his environmental craziness, but he made the point, you ever notice how China makes all the windmills, but they never use them? Which I thought, he says, they use coal, they use, anything other than wind. Why is that, And I don't know, it was just great. I don't know, I heard that on another talk show this morning on another station, but and just I'm so glad that Trump's in there to just that's the main reason that Biden that was my main beef with Biden is his environmental hysterics, just the Green New scam. I can't help calling that as well, even though it was called the Green New Deal, and just it sent this country so far backwards that it's going to take a long time and a lot of hard work to really bring it back. Like you were talking about how we only drill a quarter of what we need out of California, which is, like you say, is ridiculous. It is. It's like, why import stuff when we have it right here? We do things the cleanest way anyway. And Trump made that point. He says, all that bad air from China goes somewhere. He's making that point too, which is great. Same points I've made years ago, but it's just fun to hear a president lay on thick common sense.
Well, I began today's program by praising the president for declaring Antifa a terrorist organization. So between that and address to the United Nations, pointing out a number of things that needed to be pointed out, Mr. Trump is doing a grand job today. I'm glad to see it, and it's a pleasure to be able to offer him support.
Yeah, it's good for a change. Lately he's been kind of doing some weird stuff, as far as, kind of being a proponent of tearing down free speech a little bit in some sense, or not really tearing it down, just kind of, the FCC guy going in there and him saying, "Oh, I'm good with that." But anyway, that's all I got to say. I could talk about a lot more, but I'm sure you're gonna have other callers that want to talk about other subjects.
Hell
so that's all I got, really.
I didn't even get a call until halfway through today's program. So, again, if you want to hang on through the break, you're welcome to. That's up to you. I'll look for you when I get back. But right now, it is 11 o'clock, and I've got to make a 6-minute hiatus here. Okay?
Okay, I'll stay on.
Okay, real good. I'm Charles Freedman. This is my program. Stick around. I'll be back in 6 minutes. Okay.
The body scanner reveals the brutal truth about your body that your regular scale will never tell you. For weeks, my
There are many in the West, including many who should know better, who find it difficult, unpopular, or just plain embarrassing to defend capitalism. I take the opposite view. We should double down on it. For a very simple reason. It remains not just the best, but the only chance for the least fortunate in the world to make life better for themselves and their children. And the more we see of capitalism's rival, socialism, the more proof we have that capitalism is the way we want to go. I've seen this over and over again, from my own childhood to my time as governor of South Carolina to most recently and most dramatically during my tenure as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. I grew up in South Carolina as the daughter of Indian immigrants. My mom started a small shop selling clothes and gifts that grew into a successful business. She showed my brothers, my sister, and me what it meant to live the American dream. As my mother's story so vividly illustrates, America is a country where people can find jobs that match their talents and passions. Some Americans take this for granted. The rest of the world envies it. As governor of South Carolina, I marveled at capitalism's power to improve lives. Our pro-free market policies helped bring in more than $20 billion in investment and created jobs in every county of the state. Those jobs provide dignity and purpose. And as I often say, when you give a person a job, you take care of a family. During my time as the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, I was reminded that not every country enjoys the same freedom and prosperity as America. More than 1.5 billion people still suffer under socialist regimes. In 2018, I stood on the Simon Bolivar Bridge at the border of Venezuela and Colombia. I watched thousands of Venezuelans cross into Colombia for the only meal they might have that day. I held a beautiful baby girl. Her mother told me all she wanted for her daughter was a future of freedom. They were one of millions of Venezuelan families whose lives have been destroyed by the country's socialist policies. So imagine my dismay to find that socialism has become trendy here in America. American socialists claim they seek a more enlightened socialism, like those found in Scandinavian countries. But those countries are not socialist. They're capitalist and offer large welfare benefits. But ironically, to make their system work, they've had to repeatedly slash their corporate tax rates. Denmark has cut its corporate rate by more than half since the 1990s. Other democracies, including Israel, India, and the UK, experimented with socialism, only to abandon it, and only then did they thrive. The results are in. Socialism, however you want to define it, has failed everywhere it's been tried. A handful of elites sitting in a government office can never outthink millions of business owners and consumers making millions of individual choices every moment of every day. You'd think we'd have gotten the message by now. An entire generation of American adults are too young to remember the suffering socialism caused during the last century. Instead of teaching students to reject our country's history and founding ideals, schools should have a required class on the history and collapse of the Soviet Union. Young people at least have the excuse of being miseducated. But what does one say about corporate CEOs who give in to social trends rather than standing up for a system that their own businesses and workers depend on? I'm talking about advocates of so-called stakeholder capitalism, a philosophy that retains the word capitalism but abandons its meaning. Recently, the chief executives of some of America's largest companies changed their self-definition. They said companies should focus on customers, workers, and communities. This is just politically correct nonsense. These CEOs know that's what successful businesses already do. It's what they have to do to survive in our capitalist system. A company that cheats its customers, mistreats its workers, and abuses its community won't be around long. Profits are what keep a business going and allow it to thrive. They generate the funds needed for more job creation. You don't need an advanced economics degree to understand this. So why are these CEOs so anxious to embrace this in-name-only capitalism? Probably because they think they need to placate the noisemakers on the socialist left. But that's a fool's game. The left is never satisfied. So let's defend what works. And what works is capitalism. Until the unforeseeable shutdown of the economy as a response to the coronavirus, it was working better than ever. Unemployment was at a 50-year low. Wages were rising at the fastest rate in a decade. More women and minorities were working than ever before. Poverty was at a record low in America. Let's get back to that as quickly as possible. There's only one way to do it: capitalism. I'm Nikki Haley for Prager University.
Okay. Bibbidi. There we go. Hour number 3 begins, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the theme music short because Zach has remained with us through the break, and so we will immediately resume talking with him. Thank you very much, sir. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for holding me on.
You bet.
Yeah, I could talk about stuff forever, but you mentioned you were mentioning cannabis, and you are right. It is a lot stronger than it used to be. The extracts and all that stuff. And actually, I was just going to tell you a funny story. I can't tell you who this is, but I know somebody who basically was called to like a company to do a big job at this big industrial cannabis legal facility, right?
Okay.
And in principle, they refused the job just because they're like, no, I see this as a big problem, and I mean, sent them an email and everything saying, no, I don't want to do a job for you because I just don't believe in your product. It's kind of interesting, and it's just, I don't know, it's one of those dividing things, you know, amongst people in society where it's like it works for some, right? It like that use it as, I don't know, medicine perhaps, whatever. I'm sure there's a, you know, if you're going through chemo, what else is going to get you to eat like cannabis, right? But for like society in general, for like, you know, I think a lot more kids these days are, you know, utilizing heavy cannabis products. In fact, I know they are, and just like insanely heavy products that I don't know what the long-term effects really are. I'm not a scientist, but it'll be interesting to see with the legalization. It seems to be that.
Well,
I don't know if it's better.
Let me interject for just a second. When we repealed prohibition, we didn't make it legal for kids to drink. Now, to my knowledge, I've been in favor of legalization of pot for, you know, ever since I was in high school. I wasn't using it, but I believed it should be legal. But under no circumstances did I ever believe that it should be legal for children. My position was that we should treat marijuana the same way we would treat alcohol. It would be a controlled substance. The sale of it would be licensed. It would be taxed. It would be, you would be required to show identification. So the idea of legalization, the issue of children using it, that's another issue entirely. And for underage people to be using marijuana is a terrible thing, particularly this stronger stuff we have nowadays. I'm no specialist in these things. I don't pretend to be a brain expert, but it seems to me that given the effect of this stuff on the brain, that an unformed, growing brain is at risk when combined with marijuana. It's just ghastly, not even to be contemplated.
Yeah, no, yeah, I've seen some examples, but and it just it's well, there's some things about it, because you could be 18 and get a medical card, and then until you're 21, that's to when you could get the recreational stuff. So I think maybe sometimes, the 18-year-old or whatever is maybe trickling it down to his buddies or whatever, or his or her buddies. I don't know. And then the whole, and have you, I don't know about you, but have you noticed any improvement in like infrastructure because of taxes? from cannabis? I mean, I really haven't. I mean, I thought there would be huge improvements in schools, in, you know, it seems like everything can't afford to be, you know, school districts are becoming bankrupt, and, you know, there's road construction going on, but maybe, I don't think enough. You know, when you think about all the taxes they should be raking in, I mean, where's that money going?
Well, it's always a question of what they do with their taxes. I'm old enough to remember when Californians were asked to approve a lottery, and that there was a bill on the, you know, Governor Deugmejian had vetoed a state lottery. The legislature put it on his desk, and he said no. He was a very, very fine governor, and he wasn't afraid to veto bills. But the vested interest, you see, the company that makes money off the lottery is the company that runs the lottery. The state of California contracts with a private company to run the lottery, and they make money. But we were promised that if we instituted the lottery, that it would pay for all of our schools. Remember that? I don't know if you would do or not, but we were told that if we wanted to solve the problem of underfunded schools, the lottery was the way to do it. Well, the lottery was put in some 30 or 40 years ago, and every year, like clockwork, the educational lobby comes around and says, we don't have enough, give us more money. They're spending money like it's going out of style. The test scores continue to decline, and in the meantime, we see examples of parochial schools and charter schools where expenditure per student is far lower, but academic accomplishment is far higher. So any rational person is going to conclude that educational excellence is not a function of monetary input. But they don't stop there. Now, you asked about tax revenues from sale of cannabis. Well, the state of California hasn't handled this very well. They have set taxes on cannabis kind of the way they've set taxes on tobacco. They're so high that they actually encourage an illegal trade. Right now, I read an article recently, in California, something like 35 or 40% of the cigarettes sold, tobacco cigarettes, are smuggled in from other states. They don't bear California tax stamps because the California tax is so high, a couple of bucks a pack at least, that smugglers find it worthwhile to bring out-of-state cigarettes in and sell them here. Taxes on cannabis have been set at levels that make it practical and attractive for criminal activity to grow up. And, of course, when a criminal sells cannabis, he doesn't pay any taxes. So, essentially, the state of California, I believe, could make more money out of cannabis taxes if they were willing to lower the rates.
Probably so. That's how economics works, at least, I think. That makes sense to me. And as far as, it's just how they allocate it and also lowering the taxes, sure. And it just, my bottom line is, as far as, philosophy goes, adults can do what they want because they know what they need to survive, but kids don't. And that's just, that's what kind of makes me wonder if it's the same equivalent as prohibition from the 30s. But I guess it is. It's the same kind of thing if you prohibited something. Just trying to get straight on it in my own mind. You're helping me with that. Thank you.
Well, okay, but if you prohibit something, if you put outright prohibition on it, you're essentially saying, well, if you want to get this, you've got to get it from a criminal, because the only people who are selling it are by definition criminals because it's prohibited. So this was a golden opportunity for a criminal element in this country during the era of prohibition between 1920 and 1933, and it actually did permanent damage because the criminal organizations that grew up as a result of prohibition didn't simply disappear when prohibition was repealed. Those organizations were still there, and they simply went into other fields of operation: prostitution, drugs, gambling, protection rackets, you name it. But once you have this criminal organization, in place, it's going to do like anything. It's going to fight like hell to remain there. And criminal organizations fighting like hell is a good way to make your community very unsafe.
Right. Yeah. So I guess prohibition is ultimately worse. That's kind of what I've been thinking. But man, is it? You really notice a deterioration amongst, the stronger stuff. And I mean, I'm not against it for adults. I think adults do whatever you want. They know what they need. I don't care. I'm a libertarian in that sense. But yeah, it's. I guess prohibition's not the way either. It's maybe lowering maybe what you say.
Yep,
the tax on it.
The prohibitionist is somewhat of a utopian. He believes that if you pass a law against something, that you will simply eliminate it. And in the real world, we've proven that that's not true. As a matter of fact, quite often, even though you're dealing with a harmful substance, the prohibition of it causes more problems than legalizing and regulating. We saw that amply illustrated with alcohol back when music was much better. But the thing is that people came to understand. It took 13 years, but people came to understand that the costs of prohibition were worse than the costs of legal alcohol.
That's history showed that. Well, I could talk about Putin. I could talk about a million other subjects, but I'm sure you got other presentations people want to hear.
Well, the next one I was going to go into is this government shutdown. It looks like we're going to be treated to in the not too far distant future, and the politics of that. But if you have something to say about Mr. Putin, I would love to hear it, provided you watch your language. When I'm discussing Mr. Putin on this program, it's a great problem because I have the proper vocabulary to adequately describe Mr. Putin, but if I use it, they'll throw me off the air.
Oh, yeah. I do have choice words. I will not use that on your show. Use those. But, yes, the government shutdown, I think, is ultimately maybe more important than Putin even. Putin's an important factor in this world, but I think, thinking about our own backyard is, thinking about the sewage spill in our backyard that needs to be picked up is maybe more important than what's going on in the neighbor's yard. So I'll let you get to it. I got to cut some wood and build a crate and all kinds of stuff to do.
Well, have a good day, and thank you very much for your call. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Charles.
Okay, so we will... Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about this government shutdown. We continually have these, I believe it was just yesterday I was talking about the apparatus of government as a set of levers. And instead of, whose hands are on a lever, throw away the lever. We talked about free speech earlier. We have this FCC that's got a lever to throttle speech, and we see that when the Democrats are in, they use it one way, and when the Republicans are in, they use it another way. Throwing away the lever would be a good idea. It's a good argument for getting rid of the FCC altogether, because it's inimical to free speech. Although, I can see a need for regulating the broadcast world. There's only seats available, and only there needs to be order imposed. But when the FCC begins to step on free speech rights, it's in violation of the Constitution. Well, on a much smaller scale, politicians of both parties have discovered that since the Senate has unlimited debate, and it takes a 60-vote supermajority to invoke cloture and end debate, thereby bringing measures to the floor for a vote, it is possible for minorities in the Senate to simply deny those votes. We're going to have unlimited debate. It's never going to end. And so the budget, in this particular case, a continuing resolution to fund the government, doesn't come to the floor. It's not voted. And we wind up with a government shutdown. because the government runs out of spending authority. Senator Ron Johnson, a Wisconsin Republican who is, comes from that age-old idea, a successful businessman who became a U.S. Senator. He has an idea for dealing with this, but right now I see we have a telephone caller. Mark is on the line, so let us go ahead and hear what he has to say, because he wants to talk about free speech, and he's probably for it. Let's find out. Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Well, depends who's talking. A lot has been made about Jimmy Kimmel and his loss of his First Amendment right, his loss of free speech. And I'm thinking, well, he can't get on the internet and post his thought. Well, yeah, he can. Well, he can't write a letter to the editor. Well, yes, he can. He can't get on a soapbox and get on the street corner and espouse his views. Well, no, he can. The only thing he was denied, and I think it relates back to his business group, is he's not going to get $16 million a year to expound on his free speech philosophy.
You've heard, of
course...
But
his free speech being denied...
Mark, you've heard, of course, that his cancellation or his suspension is over as of tonight. He's back on television tonight. Did you know that?
Well, that's not true. One of his big groups in several states, and I don't know the media corps, are not renewing it. So
yeah,
he's back some places.
So there,
not every place.
We're not over with this yet.
Yeah,
But the thing is that Mr. Kimmel still has his. Well, the people who were canceled off of Twitter and Facebook and like that, they still had the ability to go outside their front door and scream too. But we were upset when we learned that government figures, people in the Biden administration, had colluded with the heads of these platforms and influential people there to deplatform the speech of people they didn't like. So if we're going to be for free speech, we ought to be for free speech, 100%. And I feel that way.
Well, we should go up to Sacramento today and talk to our legislatures, Gavin Newsom, and particularly Gail Pellerin, because she's a sponsor of this bill. And today they passed the Social Media Platform Endangering California Act. And what this is going to limit, it's going to limit social media and what is posted on there. And it's going to result in some pretty major fines, not against the poster, but the media, the platform itself, so Facebook or whatever. But it's...
So, Mark?
It's interesting. Who it's going to protect?
I got a question.
Well, yeah.
My question is, how long do you think this will last before the Supreme Court overturns it? Because today's Supreme Court is very hawkish on the First Amendment, so I don't think this will last long. I think it's an exercise in foolishness.
It'll last long. It'll last longer than Jimmy Kimmel's censorship. But anyhow, but what they want to do is it'll be illegal to intimidate or terrorize Californians because of their sex, race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, disability, medical condition, genetic information, marital status, sexual orientation, citizenship, primary language, immigration status. So you can't comment on any of that. So it will protect the most victimized people, or LGBTQ group, the community, and especially young teens and such. I'll get back to that in a minute. But anyhow, it's odd, is my ally in this, fighting this, is CARE, the Council of, the group, CAIR, is very much against this because they figure that if they criticize anything on Israel or the Jewish faith, they're going to come down hard on them. And I'd rather see them post their thoughts and then we could rebut them. But again, for the liberals, the people on the left, to criticize what happened to Jimmy Kimmel, which didn't actually happen, and he's still going to make it $16 million a year, where we, the common folk, can't get on here and criticize, maybe Gavin Newsom, And, then the social platform will take that off because of the liabilities to them. So I think the common folk here, which I care about, are the ones that are going to be hammered on this. And, heck with Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, I like consistency. And the idea being free speech is okay for people who agree with me, and free speech is okay for people who don't agree with me. And if Jimmy Kimmel wants to get on his program and mouth nonsense, which he did, he has a perfect right to do that. And I have a perfect right to come on this program and say, hey, did you hear Jimmy Kimmel last night? Boy, talk about being full of beans. And say he said this, and that's bogus, and here's why and how. I can do that. I have done that. The idea,
and I agree, but
the idea that the California legislature would somehow feel that they now have to step in and act as a speech or expression arbiter or policeman or whatever you want to say. Again, this is Mr. Newsom is about the business of running for president, and if he thinks this is going to further his presidential ambitions, he's dead wrong.
Well, we shall see. And again, this is our local people, Gail Pellerin, Don Addis, and John Laird in the Senate all voted for this, and Gail Pellerin is a co-sponsor of it. So, you want to give her a call today, please do so. But, it's interesting. Related to this, I buy the Sunday Santa Cruz Sentinel every Sunday and sit at home and read it. And it was just full of the censorship of Jimmy Kimmel and such and such. And I went through that paper, and on the editorial page, letters, the editor page, everything page, I could not find one conservative viewpoint, not one. And for them to state that, the conservatives are coming down and censoring free speech, well, come on, guys, offer some alternative viewpoints. I mean, I'd love to get a common sense guy like Victor Davis Hanson to write a editorial for the Santa Cruz Sentinel. I think it'd be fantastic, but it's never going to happen. But, and fine, they can have their newspaper and do whatever, but then to criticize conservatives for limiting free speech, I don't think so.
Well, as I say, I'm a paragon of consistency here. I like free speech even if it doesn't agree with me, and that you cannot say about the left. Hey, incidentally, I got news for you. When I was out at the fair the other day doing broadcasts, a young woman came by and introduced herself. Her name is Shannon Kessler. And Shannon Kessler is the candidate running for assembly against Dawn Addis. She's in your district.
Yeah. Well, does she live up here or down there?
Oh, no, she's from...
It's a crazy district.
She's from San Luis Obispo County, and we were discussing the ancestry of the people who designed the district the way they did. And neither of us had anything favorable to say about that. But I told her, I gave her my secret. I've had it's no secret, hell, I've been trumpeting it every 2 years for years. Here is how you run for state assembly or state senate or Congress. You get, you either rent or find a supporter who has an RV and you borrow it, or you rent one. So you get an RV. Because the district is huge. You've got to be, you can't be driving home every night. That's ridiculous. So you get this RV, you plaster it all over with your campaign signs. So wherever anybody sees it, they're going to see all these signs. Oh, Kessler for assembly. And you're going to get the name out there. You rent a PA system, carry it in the vehicle. You have your signs and your literature and everything in the vehicle. You park at shopping centers, you park at busy street corners, you go wherever there's a bunch of people, and you raise a hoorah. And you give your stump speech and say whatever you want to say for, 15, 20 minutes, and then you hand out your literature and respond to people's questions. And the reason for this is because nobody knows who you are, Sharon. And right now that's, that can't happen. People have to know who you are. People, if you walk up to 100 people on the street today in your district and say, what do you think of Shannon Kessler? They're going to say, who? I don't know what I don't know who that is.
Well,
and so I told her that, and I don't know whether she's going to do it or not. But I've been telling state legislative and congressional candidates this for some 30 or 40 years now, and they never do it, and they never win. So until somebody actually tries it and loses, I'm going to continue saying it.
Well, I applaud her for doing that.
So do I.
The irony, her being at the Santa Cruz County Fair.
Yeah.
The fairground's not in her district.
Well, I told her, I told her, Shannon, I won't be voting for you. And she looked up and said, "Not in the district, huh?" And I said, "That's right. I'm not. So this is obviously a problem that she recognizes. But the play that you play, the cards you're dealt, and she understands that. She's an adult woman, and she's not spending her time, griping and moaning about the district. Instead, she's going around talking to as many people as she can, and trying to shift the odds. So I don't know if she'll be able to do it or not, but." At least by the time the election comes around, if she takes my suggestion, at least people will know who the hell she is, which will be something.
I would tell her to get an RV and go park in front of those monstrosity mega structures they're building in your neighborhood and say, Don Addis, Gail Peller, and John Laird, they voted for this. This is what you vote for them. This is what you get. I'd go park in front of a gas station where gas is $6 a gallon. I say, these people voted for this. They're the Green New Deal folks. Vote for me, and I'll try to get rid of this. I mean, on and on. I would just use comments. I'd park in front of the grocery store. Say, how much that bag of groceries costs you? Who caused that?
Yeah, exactly. I will get Greta Thunberg out of your life.
Yeah. Anyhow, this is SB 771. If people want to get on their search engines and see what this is, but you're going to be limited what you can post on Facebook, Nextdoor, and what all in the state of California. And if they deem it's harassing that long list of individuals, it's going to be out of there.
All right. It will never pass constitutional muster, but just the same, the main thing that it's going to do. This is everything Governor Newsom is doing now. Everything he does has to be viewed through the prism of his campaign for president. So obviously, this is something he's doing in order to curry favor with the ultra left in the Democratic Party. They'll think this is terrific, and it will help him in winning the nomination. But the problem is that if you curry enough favor with those people, you're gonna alienate a lot of normal people and make it more difficult for you to win in November.
Yeah, and Jimmy Kimmel's not going to talk about this tonight. He's going to get his $16 million paycheck, go back to his mansion in his gated community, and isolate himself from the common folk and whine and moan that he's being harassed. Anyhow, everyone look up SB 771.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd be interested. The only thing, I'm certainly not going to listen to Mr. Kimmel's program tonight. I've never indulged in him. But, the comments that got him suspended, there was nothing funny about that. He's supposed to be a comedian. Supposed to come out there like Johnny Carson would. Hey, I've got here's the jokes for tonight, and he'd come out and tell some funny stories, some of them topical, and we'd get some laughs. And if the jokes weren't that good, then those were the best nights. When Carson's monologue was falling dead, and he'd reach up and get the microphone. Hello, blue light special on aisle 7, things like that. Just to, find out if the audience was still there at all. But, this was a comedian at work. This has got to make you laugh. Kimmel? No comedian there. He's a political polemicist. He's decided to be something else. So, I guess we'll all have a chance to see how that works for him. But frankly, Margot, I don't give a damn. It is 11:35. Time for our last package of advertisements on today's program. I will be back in 2 minutes. The telephone number is 831-265-5050.
You have to move now. No problem. Store your stuff at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24/7 security. Drive it to your door and store it at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
You sold your motorcycle to a friend in Fresno and need to deliver it. Well, Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom has motorcycling car trailers ready to go. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
Back in the 16th century, a famous prophet and psychic, Nostradamus, predicted great disasters. Hundreds of years later, believe it or not, a lot of his predictions have come true. Today we have another psychic and prophet among us. His name is Nostradamus. His great ability to predict when home repairs, primarily a roof, will become a much-needed thing is truly remarkable. His predictions have been renowned and recorded for many years now. Yes, Nostradamus can be found, a key owner at Knox Roofing, and he can give you accurate advice on when your roof will leak. His ability to see your home completed with only the best products and services is truly amazing. If you need a sitting with Nostradamus, all you need to do is call 461-0634, and you can receive a free reading of your home's life and its life-changing events about to occur. Okay, thanks, folks.
Cannabis is one of nature's most beneficial plants. Hello, I'm Jenna. Treehouse Dispensary, we use information about cannabis to build community. Listen to Xavier.
Thank you, Jenna. For those suffering joint pain, Treehouse suggests trying a CBD THC topical like the Balance Salve from local Santa Cruz company, Jade Nectar. Then enjoy the relief.
For answers to your cannabis questions, ask your friends at Treehouse Dispensary, 3651 Soquel Drive in Soquel, or ourtreehouse.io.
11:38, and Mike in Aptos is on the line. Let's find out what's on his mind. Good morning, sir, and thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Freedman. Wanted to make a quick comment about Jimmy Kimmel. He's kind of in, I would say he's in a category that is pretty new to the 21st century in terms of whether somebody is a comedian or somebody's a political commentator. I believe Ben Shapiro pointed this out years ago with Jon Stewart, that, he made the observation that Jon Stewart was coming out towards the end of his time on The Daily Show and making all these political observations. I believe he appeared on CNN or Fox and kind of called out the two commentators that kind of did a crossfire type of show, and that they're letting the American public down. And Shapiro pointed out, you take a guy like Jon Stewart, very intelligent guy, and he makes all these political commentaries, and then when he's called out on it, he retreats behind, well, I'm a comedian. And I think with the late night talk show hosts in general, that's what they've gone on to do. Now, what Jimmy Kimmel often does is it's not comedy. When you're crying on the air about a subject, that's not being done for laughs. You are making a political statement. My personal opinion, I used to really like Jimmy Kimmel. I think he's a total freaking hack of the left. And I think ABC would have every right to sack him. I think the Trump administration screwed that up. But it's just kind of a different place nowadays. And it's just a reminder to people, the First Amendment doesn't guarantee you a forum. I don't have a right to go pass out political pamphlets at the hospital I work. I can do it in my own time, and the hospital has no, cause to fire me if they find out I'm doing it on my own time. But if I'm in a forum where I'm representing my employer, they have every right to say, no, we want you to represent us like this. And damn the Trump administration for screwing this up, because I think if just left to their own devices, I think Kimmel would still be off the air. That's my thought.
That's very reasonable. I tend to think so, too, because what Kimmel said was part of that. The other day there was a full-page story in the Wall Street Journal. This was a Sunday paper about crazy conspiracy theories surrounding Charlie Kirk's assassination. And some of the darndest people, Candace Owens, who is a conservative commentator, has come up with something about the Israeli government assassinating Charlie Kirk, which is just ludicrous. And Jimmy Kimmel coming up with this nonsense about, well, Tyler Robinson was a MAGA Republican who assassinated Charlie Kirk. That's nuts. That's political disinformation. And the thing is that the remedy for that is the truth. You say, I'm sorry, Mr. Kimmel, but, when your head is that far up there, you can't tell whether it's day or night. So pull your head out and look at the facts and understand that Tyler Robinson had become radicalized, something we've seen a lot of over the past several years, and simply was of the opinion that what Charlie Kirk was saying warranted his death. And here's the ice cream, here's the here's the icing on the cake. The things that Tyler Robinson believed that Charlie Kirk had said were not things that he had actually said. They were things that people like you and other agendized haters of Charlie Kirk had mischaracterized and hyperbolized what he actually said, to the point that Tyler Robinson was motivated to assassination not by Charlie Kirk, but by this straw version of Charlie Kirk that you and others like you constructed. So how does it feel to be guilty of murder, you son of a bitch?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at some point, I would like, I don't think it's going to happen, but at some point, I wish some of the Democratic leaders would acknowledge the push for violence that exists on the left. Because what we're seeing out there right now, at least in the social media circles, and I think mainstream media to a certain degree, and then in the entertainment industry, the biggest threat to this country right now is still white supremacy. And, the increase in the push for the left to become violent. And you think about it, that's a political philosophy. I mean, what do conservatives want? In general, they want the status quo. Real conservatives want smaller government. I don't think there are that many real conservatives in the Republican Party these days, but they merely want the status quo. They want things to kind of either remain how they were or go back to how things were in the past. Whereas right now, the Democratic Party has been completely radicalized by the far left, not liberals, but leftists. And they literally want to take down society and rebuild it in some kind of Marxist utopian, blueprint. So, of course, the revolutionaries are going to want violence, not the people who want the status quo. And I wish the media would start addressing that in a responsible manner, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Well, the only part of your presentation that bothers me is I don't like being characterized as a defender of the status quo. In my lifetime, the most revolutionary leader we've had in the White House, and that continues through to the present day, the most revolutionary leader, the one who wanted to change things most, was Ronald Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan was not interested at all in preserving the status quo. He was interested in overturning as much of the status quo as he possibly could. Does this mean that he was willing to employ violence or urge others to employ violence? No, of course not. Ronald Reagan was a constitutionalist. He understood that within our Constitution, radical change is possible. It's provided for. And that on a number...
And I think...
Go ahead.
I think I used very bad terminology in there. What I meant by the status quo, what I was thinking in my head wasn't so much keep things as dysfunctional as they are right now, but let's keep the things that work and make this country successful going, as opposed to capitalism is related to race. We need to take it down and, build this society built on equity. I kind of more meant, they want to keep the things that work.
I get it. But again, a modern conservative is not a person interested in preserving the status quo. Barry Goldwater once said, I don't want to vote for somebody who promises to pass more laws. He said, I would like to vote for somebody who says, elect me and I will repeal existing laws.
Yes.
So, but the thing is that the methodology here is at question. Do you assassinate or otherwise assault and attack? Earlier in this program, I played a presentation from a young man who had been a member of Antifa. I did this in the course of praising the president for designated Antifa a terrorist organization. Here's this fellow who said, I was part of this, and here's my insight from being in this and taking part in their activities and their violence. And he said, fortunately, I had friends and family who were able to turn me back to sanity, and I've recovered from that aberration. But this is very dangerous stuff, and here's what it's all about. So, I don't know. The Democrats, the far left wing of the Democratic Party, if something happens that upsets them, what do? They stage riots. They go out and they burn trash cans, and they turn over cars, and they smash windows, etc. The murder of Charlie Kirk has galvanized and outraged the American right, but I have not read or heard of a single incident of violence being done in the name of Charlie Kirk, or in the name of protesting Tyler Robinson, or protesting the assassination. I have heard of vigils being held. I've heard of a huge rally in a football stadium in Arizona. I've heard of plenty of people on campuses saying, I want more information about Turning Point. I want to join Turning Point, things like this.
Yep.
Everything absolutely peaceful and according to Hoyle, but nonetheless sincere and driven by real feelings. There is no reason why you cannot have political activity, effective political activity and organizing without violence. As a matter of fact, I think the most effective organizing is done without violence.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I hope that doesn't change. I mean, I hope Kirk's memory does galvanize the right. I hope this isn't something that's just a flash in the pan. I know, they're doing everything they can to keep his videos going. My fear is that it's going to be like so many news cycles in this country where we'll just kind of move on to something else. Because I don't think Kirk will die in vain regardless. I think it will keep something going, but I hope it remains big. And I hope it's like a wake-up call for this country, that there's so much about our way of life and our democracy that is under threat. And I happen to, I've told you before, I was 30 years a very loyal Democrat. Trump is the first Republican I ever voted for. And I just think that the Democratic Party and the left has just gone so far, and they're a legitimate threat. And we need to start looking at it that way and taking it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time. Appreciate your call today, sir.
You have a good day, sir.
Well, that's laying it on the line, by golly. Yeah, I wasn't going to do that much talking today about Charlie Kirk, but the one thing that I want everybody to take home is that he was killed for something, or for things that he never said. I mean, he was killed for caricatures and misstatements and perversions. I guess that's a good word. Perversions of things he said. So Charlie Kirk died for other people's lies told about him. Okay, I do want to get at least some commentary about this upcoming government shutdown, because this is going to be an interesting political show. Senator Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin, writes, the U.S. has experienced 3 government shutdowns since I entered the Senate in 2011. During that time, Congress has passed 55 continuing resolutions which increased or suspended the debt ceiling 12 times. The national debt has grown during those 14 years from $14 trillion to $37 trillion. In 2019, I supported a bill that would have done away with government shutdowns forever. It passed the committee that I chaired on a vote of 12-2, so obviously strong bipartisan support because that committee was very evenly divided. But it never passed on the floor of either chamber of Congress. With another shutdown looming, I've introduced an even simpler bill, the Eliminate Shutdowns Act, that could end the drama and uncertainty of Congress's budgetary dysfunction. Some argued the 2019 bill would lead to higher spending and prohibit consideration of other measures until appropriation bills were passed. Those were legitimate concerns. My new bill simply provides for automatic 2-week rolling continuing resolutions for any department for which an appropriation bill or longer-term continuing resolution hasn't been passed. This would keep spending flat by prorating the previous year's spending level. The simpler bill could be a game changer. With government funding and functioning assured, Congress would no longer have to spend weeks and months arguing over how to keep government departments open after failing to pass appropriations bills. Appropriations for individual departments would no longer be held hostage until a deal is done for everything. Instead, Congress could focus on areas of agreement, pass those appropriations, then horse trade on areas of disagreement. There would be no artificial deadlines, only the pressure of working with the other side to fund each other's priorities. It's impossible to say exactly how this would play out, but could it be any worse than the current situation? That's always a great question. And it points to, I'm not saying this is perfect. I'm not a utopian. But I am saying this is an improvement over the status quo, which incidentally is a much lower bar. One outcome might be bipartisan reform of the budget and appropriations process. It's clearly broken and needs repair. There have been good proposals over the years, but the partisanship involved in annual funding fights makes it impossible for them to get traction. Converting to multi-year funding cycles is my main priority. We should admit that Congress simply isn't capable of passing 12 individual appropriation bills each year. Instead, we should draft, debate, and pass 6 two-year appropriations on a rotating basis every year. In the non-appropriation year for a particular account, the relevant committees can conduct oversight. It might even be worth considering 4 3-year appropriations, allowing 2 years of oversight for each account. The fighting over funding fiscal 2025 lasted 6 months. No one can predict how long we'll be at loggerheads trying to fund 2026, with Democrats spending demands that increase 10-year deficits by $1.5 trillion as their price for a 4-week continuing resolution. A shutdown seems all but certain. At least this time a Republican administration will manage the shutdown in a way that minimizes harm to the nation. Democrats take the opposite approach. They look for ways to inflict as much pain as possible for political advantage. Fortunately, this turmoil can be avoided permanently by passing the Eliminate Shutdowns Act. Anyone voting no is voting to continue budgetary chaos and should be held accountable by the American people. Signed, Ron Johnson, Republican of Wisconsin. This is the kind of person that historically has made up the U.S. Congress. Here's a guy, I can't remember what, I think he had a plastics business up in Wisconsin. I think that was the nature of his business. I'm not sure of that. But here's a guy who started and ran a small business. He provided jobs to people in his community. He produced products that people wanted at prices they could afford. So he was acquainted through his work with everyday reality, dealing with people, meeting their needs, accommodating them, making compromises, getting things done, establishing something that lasts and that actually yields a living, not just to him, but to all the people who work there with him. People like this are the people who traditionally have, at a certain time in their life, put themselves forward for a seat in Congress or a seat in the U.S. Senate, and then spent time there. Ron Johnson was elected to the Senate in 2010, so he's on his 3rd term now. My guess is probably at the end of this term he'll probably quit and go back to Wisconsin. I hate losing people like this, but I understand that they're temporary visitors. At least Johnson is serving a third term, during which I think he's doing much good. People who come and serve 1 or 2 Senate terms, well, why did you bother in the first place? Now, if you get beaten for re-election, that's one thing. I can understand that you didn't make that choice. But to simply come and spend 6 or 12 years in the Senate and not stay long enough to get anything significant accomplished is bunkum. So Ron Johnson is on his third term, but again, this is the kind of guy that has built the country over the years, and I'm happy to be able to bring his ideas and proposals regarding these idiotic and counterproductive government shutdowns. Hey, he's got an idea to end them all together. That sounds interesting to me, and I thought it might to you as well. Looking at Stephen Bennett writes, I know it's late in your show, saw this go by recently. You may have seen it. It's a 2-minute clip from Johnny Carson, an interview on 60 Minutes. In the resurfaced clip, Mike Wallace voiced a critique made by some at the time that Carson would never take a serious controversy. Carson had an immediate answer for it. Now, tell me the last time that Jack Benny, Red Skelton, any comedian used his show to do serious issues. That's not what I'm here for. Can't they see that? Why do you think that just because you have a Tonight Show, you must deal in serious issues? That's a danger. It's a real danger. Once you start that, you start to get self-important, feeling what you say has great impact. And, strangely enough, you could use that show as a forum. You could sway people, and I don't think you should as an entertainer. So, Stephen, thank you very much for that. And there's a clip here of Johnny delivering this wisdom, which I think I'll look at off air. But, Mr. Carson understood his profession, his occupation, his job. This is what you do. And Jack Benny was arguably one of the greatest, arguably the greatest, certainly one of the greatest comedians ever. Jack Benny was a partisan Democrat. He voted for Roosevelt, Truman, Stevenson, all those people. He didn't make that part of his program because he wanted people like me to listen to him and to forget about politics and laugh at the next joke about Carmichael or Rochester or any of the other people who populated his program. This was the Jack Benny program.
You get sensitive about the fact that people say he'll never take a serious controversy. Well, I have an answer to that. I said, now, tell me the last time that Jack Benny, Red Skelton,
he and his writers, and his gang,
Benny, comedian,
one hell of a
used his show to do serious issues. That's not what I'm there for. Can't they see that?
Wasn't part of
but
his talent.
Why do they think that just because you have a Tonight Show that you must deal in serious issues?
Populating his show. With
That's
the
a
Phil
danger.
Harrises and the
It's a real danger. Once you start that, you start to get that self-important feeling that what you say has great import. And strangely enough, you could use that show as a forum. You could sway people, and I don't think you should as an entertainer.
Freedman. I will see you tomorrow. It has been a pleasure to be with you. 9:06 in the morning, we'll get back together. Right now, stick around. Okay, let's do this. Okay. 2:07.